Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inspiring Thursday, the podcast by Vestis Labs, where we explore key insights, trends, and innovations that are shaping the fashion industry with inspiring individuals. I'm Fonny, and today I'm thrilled to have with us Harriet Saywood-Bellisario, the founder of Saywood Studio. So Harriet is a designer with over 15 years of experience in fashion design and development, and she's very dedicated to reshaping the industry with a focus on sustainability in her collections. Harriet, welcome to Inspiring Thursday, and we're very excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Fonny. I'm so excited to be here with Vestis Labs too.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be great. I'm looking forward to this conversation with you. So let's start by exploring your journey. You've had such a rich career in fashion design, working across different spectrum of the industry with iconic brands really, such as Paul Smith, Richard Nicole, to premium high streets such as Label Mix by Next. So what inspired you to start your own business, to start Saywood Studio, and what, drives your passion for sustainability in fashion?
Well,
It's
it's
a
quite
big
a
topic.
journey. Yeah, a big topic.
Mm,
So, I mean, really, I kind of always wanted to have my own label. I think the more I went through my career as well, I sort of really honed my own handwriting and kind of there there was something that I sort of felt was missing in fashion. I mean, there's so much fashion out there, so it sort of sounds like a
yeah.
wild thing to say, but for me, the like my style, what I loved, that just, when you're out shopping, you're thinking, oh, I love this, but I wish it was like this. And
Mm.
so those kind of like really classic pieces, but just with a little bit of interest and detail, that also fit really well. Because the more I shopped, the more I or tried things on, the more I felt like things just didn't, there was a bit of discomfort here or something like that. So that was kind of a bit of a passion that came through in starting the brand. But really, in when I was at uni, we did in our very first year, we did a project with DEFRA uh, and the government department, and it was all about sustainability. So at the time, I mean, it was quite a long time ago, and it was when sustainable fashion was a bit more in that sort of arena of people talk about Hessian sacks and things like that. Sustainable fashion is so not like that at all. But back then, it was quite neutral. There wasn't a lot of color. It was quite simplistic, and I that was something that I really felt like I wanted that a bit more color, a bit more interest. So we did this project, and I really looked quite in depth at, you know, not just the sustainability side of materials, but also the ethics behind it, how the farmers were treated, and the impact on them from, all the pesticides, chemicals, things like that, the fair wages as well, that weren't getting paid. And it really just stuck with me. So it became quite a big part of my final major project. And then just going through industry and kind of seeing that play out. I got to work with so many beautiful fabrics, which was amazing. But there's also that element of, what are the materials made from? And I think as more technical fabrics come into being as well, we're starting to see a lot more fossil fuel based materials. So
Yes.
yeah, I think just seeing that in industry, I just became more and more passionate about it, and really just reached a point where I thought, right, I'm ready to do this. I don't want to wait any longer. Had a little bit of a break in between two of my jobs, and that was really where I got started on Saywood, which was like 4 years before I launched the brand. So it was quite a while back.
It is challenging, you know, like the fact that you actually started and then sustained it is already a big feat, you know, like it's not easy.
Yeah, I think that's so true. You know, you when you do something, you think, right, I've got to get past the first year, and then I've got to get to the third year, and then the fifth
Yeah.
year. And I think if you're still going and you're still in it and you know you're surviving at that point, that's where you really want to sort of start to see some growth. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think it getting to that point, it sort of gives you that confidence to keep going. But also, you know, it does, you have to think, right, do I want to keep going? And yeah, I do.
That's amazing. I mean, you know, like it is very difficult, isn't it? And that personal kind of, you know, sometimes personal conflict um is always there, you know, like for me, it's a question that I ask myself very often as
Yeah.
well. Do I want to keep on going? Yes, I do, because this is what I'm passionate about, you know. So,
Yeah.
and I'm sure it's the same with you, right?
Exactly. I think the passion is so important. You know, that is a big driver, your why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Um, but also, you know, just for me, I just love product. So and like how things are finished, how things are made. I love materials. So it's like getting to work with that every day, I think is really special.
That's great. And you mentioned that you started looking into sustainability a long time ago when you were in college. Just comparing your experience on research during that time and, you know, on your project during that time and working on your brand today, has there been a big change?
Oh, immensely. I mean, I think the information that's available out there, firstly, also just I guess the difference between when you're at university versus when you're in industry,
Yes.
you don't necessarily have all those connections with the fabric mills,
Mm,
the manufacturers, the supply chain, and you can really go and ask the questions now. You know, if people are doing something towards sustainability, they will tell you because they're proud of what they're doing as well, and also because it needs to change. So people want to talk about it. And I think just the access to the supply chain and the understanding of all of that and how things are made, you know, how the raw materials are actually collected and distributed, all of those kind of things. F like finding all of that out, I think is really valuable. So yeah, it's there's definitely a, you know, a huge like learning journey that I've been on since university. But yeah, that was really what sparked it all for me. And I think the people element too was super important.
yeah, so it's really kind of, you know, nice to hear that you know, there is the shift also, you know, among the actors within the industry, that they are more open, they're really looking into this. So because, you know, a lot of the time I feel that, or there are so many talk about sustainability, but, you know, like we're still far from what we want it to be and stuff like that. But actually, you know, no, you know, like this is a big change. And, you know, listening to what your experience, there is a clear change already from, you know, the time that you started looking into it until now. So that's really reassuring for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, not everyone, but
Yes.
but
But
the people that are doing it, you know, yeah, they are talking about it. People are sharing, and it's
yeah.
a very collaborative industry and market, I think, which is really good. Like when you look back at, I don't know, fashion 10, 15 years ago, it was
Yeah.
people didn't talk about things like,
No.
and there was no sharing. I remember we were doing a show at one of the designers, and we had some embroidery to do, and we actually didn't have the right needles, but it was like 9 o'clock at night. There was no stores open, there was no next day delivery or like same day. So I'd text my friend who was working for another designer, and I was like, have you got any embroidery needles? And we sent some over on a bike, and she was like, don't tell anyone that you got them from us. It was very
Yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah.
help each other out, but it was under the radar. Whereas now
Yeah.
it's like you've got WhatsApp groups, Slack channels, everything, and people are just
Mm,
sharing information because,
that's amazing.
yeah, and everyone wants it to work. So
No,
that's
that's really, it's a really positive, and you make my day. This is such a nice, no, it's such a nice thing to hear coming from, first-hand experience, such a positive thing, and the collaboration is so important. I think that we were missing, like you said, in the industry, but now it has changed. So that's great. So talking about like all these designs, you mentioned also that, your style is timelessness and quality and fit, but with a twist, with that unexpected details, which I completely love. That's kind of like make you unique and as a brand. How do you balance this, creativity, with this kind of like timelessness, aspect of your designs, plus the principles of sustainability and ethical, sourcing and responsibility?
I guess I mean, I think there is so much creativity that goes into it. Even down to the finishings. Like I've always sort of I guess I started in, well, studio management and then product development and then design. So actually really thinking about the garment inside and out, to me firstly is all part of the design process, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't think that creativity has to be super flamboyant all the time. Like, it's
Mm,
amazing when it is and it's super artistic, but also down to the very, very finite details and really thinking about what you can utilize, the even to the color of a button. I this it, we always talk about how many different tones of whites and creams there are, but there really is. And I go from the buttons I use are all sort of like a cream tone, but actually when you put them on the garments, two different materials look entirely different.
yeah.
So is might sound very, very minute, but it is like really beautiful to be able to choose which one works best.
Yeah.
And I think the materials again, like, you know, there's such a craftsmanship to the manufacture of them, and
Yes.
the texture and detail in those, that I guess that's quite a creative side of it to me, and it's also very tactile. But also thinking about things like the colors and the levels of the colors and tones. I'm very much a color driven person, so that always inspires me, and I think that's a big part of my creativity. But even just when we talk about fit, I cut all the patterns myself at the moment. Um, Obviously have worked with Vestis Labs as well, but actually getting to see those come to life 3D, and then developing around that, because once you can see something in 3D as well, there's so much more that you can do with it. So
Yeah.
I think throughout the whole journey there is a real creative process, creativity to it. And when it comes to the sustainability side, I I don't really find it limiting, because there, it's the stories behind all of those materials as well that is so interesting. I've used an organic cotton corduroy, and the mill that I work with still hand cut the material to finish,
Wow.
which is amazing. So for me, I'm like, tell me more. I want to know, how does that work? What are the machines you're using? Like, how long does the process take? I think there's so much behind it that yeah, it sort of doesn't feel limiting ever, actually. Sometimes you have to be a bit strategic, not all the materials are available to you, or there's very limited amounts, but then in a way you have a limited edition piece where there's only 10 available, and that's really special, especially for someone to have hold of that.
Mm.
There's only 10 people in the world that are going to have it.
That's amazing. That kind of like ties into the business side of it, right? The kind of marketing strategy and so everything kind of like
Yeah.
woven in together. Um, and one thing that you said just now, which kind of like which is amazing, is that even like a piece of material, a piece of garment, there's so much story behind it. And we keep on going in our kind of like conversation, in my conversations, the storytelling is so important because that's really what makes a slow fashion different, for example, or each brand different, because each garment has its own story from the origin to the people who actually wear them. It's not kind of like just going through the machines and
Yeah.
like thousands of pieces going through the machines or whatnot. It's like, I mean, like I'm always very interested in the story behind each garment, how it's made, where the material coming from, the story of making the material. I mean, even the dyeing process, you talk about color. I mean, there's so kind of like many ways, so different ways. That's kind of like fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So
How like those dyes going into the machine and like like I kind of imagine it's these like bursts of color that sort of all over as it gets poured in, and I just think it's really exciting. But yeah, and timelessness doesn't have to be boring as well. So
no,
adding those
exactly.
little detail elements, I think are the things that sort of really help you as a wearer discover your wardrobe and the pieces. That's what people focus on when they see the pieces in real life. So I think that's all part of it as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So, with all this, how does kind of design process and your discovery process in your journey in designing your collections and also marketing your select collection influence the overall approach to transparency in fashion?
Well, I think, again, that is all part of telling the story, really.
Yeah.
So, obviously that's a huge part of the marketing as well, but um I I think it helps people really connect with the pieces. And also it's part of what I love. So I
Mhm.
guess like you get the real joy of being able to tell that story. But I think with the transparency element, it's so important. It always amazes me, we've seen like Shein who coming to the parliamentary committee recently this week when we were recording, and
Yeah.
knowing nothing about their supply chains, really. Yes, they know the supplier that they're working with, but there's so many more people throughout the chain. Um, and I mean, I just think that's really sad to not know anything about it, because actually, you know, how do all these materials, garments, things come into being? And I think the more you go back, it's really incredible. Like a mill that I work with, being able to actually tell me where they source their raw material cotton from. It is a complex system. There are lots of
Yes.
challenges to digging right deep into the supply chain, but they've then given me that information. I've then gone to that it's Supima is like a branded cotton, but they actually I contacted their team and they told me so much about how it's farmed, and they have like you can DNA trace it back to the farms, all the different farmers that they work with. It's incredible story, really, and also just to see that people care,
Yeah.
because there are so many people that do care. And I think it's always slightly lost. Designers will put something out on a runway, and it's really celebrated and that's really beautiful, but there's a huge team behind that. It
Absolutely.
was
Yeah.
never just one man that created this entire collection, but then behind that team there's a whole team of suppliers and mills, and behind those teams, the farmers and everything. So there's a lot of people in the story, and why not
Indeed.
tell their stories as well?
No, absolutely. It is, like, and like you said, it's, transparency is in knowing this is so important because like one of to tell the story for you to kind of like, ensure that what you're creating is, ethical or, is responsible towards the people, towards the planet and so forth. It is almost like the foundation, isn't it, of, like if we talk about sustainability, circularity, it is the foundation for that as well,
Yeah.
because without that, you wouldn't know whether your garment is sustainable or can be recycled or whatever it is, right? So,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, and like you putting all this in place from the design in your thought process from the very beginning, it makes a difference, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and you just embed it into what you do. So
yeah,
you make sure that you don't select the materials that you know are going to be harmful,
yeah,
and try and find out as best you can
yeah.
a bit of information.
Yeah. So I like that word embedded, the one that you say. So it's not, like it's not kind of like how do you call it? Ticking the boxes. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
more kind of like really embedded in your design process, in your thought process. It's not just, okay, I have this design and then, oh, by the way, I have to tick these boxes. It's not that, which, I know a lot of brands still do that. And just because, where they are at, for example, at their journey and so forth for very different reasons. But,
Yeah.
embedding that into the design process is something entirely different in my view than just
Exactly.
ticking the boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is much easier to start from a clean slate and just do these things from the
Absolutely.
ground up. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's much harder for brands to change the way that they've
exactly.
been doing things. And
Yeah,
also, then they have to take that customer on quite a different journey.
yeah,
So I do really admire brands that are really going for it and pushing for that change.
yeah,
But yeah, you go to sourcing events or see fabric mills, and like my bottom line is no synthetic fibers. So that's a good starting point to have. And yeah, it might be limiting in what you can use, who you can see, and all of that, but actually at the end of the day, that's what I believe is important for the brand, but also the planet, for us as people wearing clothes.
yes.
Yeah, so
And that goes back to kind of like sparking the creativity in you. Given the limited resources, you have to be super creative in creating what you want to do, what you want to have with this, limitation, so to speak, right? It is another side of creativity.
yeah, exactly. And what, as a brand as well, Saywood is still relatively small. Like I can't necessarily reach all of the fabric mills minimums.
Yes.
Might mean I have to use stock colors. Stock color services generally, like, they're not always the ideal vibrant tones that I'd like to select. But when you put them with other materials, or you think about how you're going to use them and then what you might pair them with in terms of styling, that actually makes such a big difference. So you can kind of turn something that, might not be your first go-to magpie reaction color to something entirely different just through little tweaks. So yeah, that, I suppose, that is all part of that creativity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So speaking about ethical sourcing, one of the ways that Saywood Studio stands out is by working closely with local suppliers and artisans. So let's talk about that. Why do you prioritize that, like supporting local businesses, and how does this benefit both your brand and the wider community?
Well, so firstly, obviously, localization, you're supporting the local economy, local jobs, the local community as a whole.
Yeah.
Um, but also just actually building those relationships, getting to
Mm,
see, and I guess also it comes back to the storytelling, actually getting to see your garments being manufactured, how the production lines work. There are things you can do and things you can't do. And when you can see that in real life and the reasons why behind all of those things, it makes a lot of sense. So
yeah.
it also helps you to develop as a business, as a person, in your knowledge and understanding of things, and work with those suppliers, especially the garment manufacturers, so that you're not pushing for something that's actually impossible for them to do as well.
Yes.
Which I think is quite important, like in a way that also goes back to the ethics. It's not just about the social responsibility and the fair wages, it is actually how you're also treating your suppliers. Um, and the other side of it is just getting to actually see firsthand that people are happy in what they're doing, that it's a nice company, that when you show up, it's not everyone's not had a huge scramble to kind of hide everything bad that they've been doing, and you can see it firsthand. I mean, one of the manufacturers that I go to, they have an on-site canteen and is actually open to the local community as well.
Wow.
But the food looks incredible. So you're sort of walking into this factory, like peering through the windows, like, oh my gosh, what delicious food's being made. And it's lovely because it's such a different environment. We all know as human beings, when we're at work, if if we don't have a nice place to sit and eat our lunch, or a little canteen where you get the odd treat, or those little niceties are
Mhm.
what makes your day so much better and brighter. And
Yeah.
when you don't have that, that sort of is part of the, like, oh, I've got to go to work, it's a bit of
Mm.
a drag. And actually, we go to work 5 days a week. We're actually at work for most of our life. So,
Yes.
like, let's make it good. Why,
Yeah.
why wouldn't we want to make that better? And yeah, so bit of a tangent, but I think that is the nice thing about working so localized.
Yeah. And also, I imagine that if you have any problems or challenges, you can then, quickly solve it together,
Yeah,
go there and all that. I mean, have you come across like challenges like that and that kind of like make it easier being kind of close to where your suppliers are?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that is a really key factor in it, actually.
Mm.
So good point. But yeah, you've got a problem, you can get down there and solve it,
Mm.
or they've got something on the production line and you've miscalculated your materials and you need to take
Mm.
something down there. You can do all of those things. I think that's really important. But they can show you the problem and you can resolve it together. Um, so you're learning as well, how not to do that in the future. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, it is much harder when communication is further away. Even
Mm.
previously, I worked with manufacturers in Europe, and you've got to do everything over email, and it would just be so much easier to see the
Yeah.
problem and then resolve it. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think there's a huge benefit to making sure that you can overcome a lot of these challenges.
Mhm. So talking about challenges, actually, I'm sure like during your journey there are a lot of challenges and problems, and what would you say that the main or unique challenges that you've come across, especially building this business with a lot of restrictions in terms of like sustainability, ethical, and so forth, and how do you come across how do you kind of manage to or overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say creating a brand is one of the hardest challenges I've ever done.
Mm.
And I love it. Like, I love it for that. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
no day is ever the same.
Mm.
But I think in terms of like the sustainability and ethics side of it, you really have to get clear with your values and trust your gut for a lot of it. You know, just being able to have the knowledge of the materials and things like that, and the supply chain and how it works, and then seeing how people respond to you. When if there's anything questionable, that is where you know to pull back. And you have to trust your gut with that. I think sometimes there are things that are challenging to find out, and again, you have to trust your gut, whether it's that knowledge of just the supply chain, the complexities, you know, do you trust the supplier and that end of it?
Yeah.
And yeah, I
Not
mean,
everything can be black and white, I guess, right?
yeah, exactly. And I think as you go through the process, you put more questions down. You're thinking, right, next time, how can I do this? And how can I find out this bit of information? And what do I need to ask? So with every collection, you're learning as well, and maybe you're adding in a new material, um, or something like that. And it, yeah, so I think you never stop coming up against those challenges. But you just have to keep working towards them really. And again, choose your suppliers wisely, because actually they're they're on your side and they will share information. So I think that does really help with the sustainability and ethics side of it.
On the business side, though, what would you say the biggest
On the business
challenges?
side.
Right.
um,
Or, on the kind of, building that brand, building that business. I mean,
yeah, I mean, there's so many challenges when it comes to
yeah, I can.
so firstly, I'm from a product background, so sales, marketing, all of that side of it is such a steep learning curve for me. And I think also just how you build a brand, because on the journey, another huge part of it is always cash flow, funding, how much money you have to actually do all of these things. And when you
Yeah.
are small, you have to be okay with doing it organically, because you know you don't have all this money that you can plug into paid advertising, or that you can produce these huge collections and test loads of different things. You can't reach all of your customers in one go. It takes time to build up your social media followings and just get the brand out
Yes.
there and noticed. So I think you have to be okay with doing it, at a slower pace. You can only go as fast as you can go. You've got to learn a lot along the way, and to be honest, learn it fast. But the more that you learn, the more you can hone in on things. So I've just been through a big sort of creative strategy process, and really looking at the overall brand, and the visual impact and direction and things like that. So now that I've done that, it's made everything so much smoother for me. Like January, going into marketing and planning for social media, I'm like, oh, this is actually much better. It's much easier. But I couldn't have done that if I hadn't actually spent the last few years just putting the brand out there and seeing what came back to me in terms of the customer feedback and what people are saying, what they're interested in. When I started, I was so passionate about the sustainability side. I just wanted to tell people all about that. And actually, for a lot of people, it's quite overwhelming and it's quite technical, to be honest. So
Yes, that's
if
true.
it's sort of too much information, and first and foremost, they have to connect with the product and the brand concept. So without, and that's how we shop. No one goes into a shop and goes, oh, well, that's 100% organic cotton. I'm going to buy it. I don't care what it looks like. Like they want to know what that piece is going to look like on them. Do they like the piece? Does it fit? Is it comfortable? And then after all of that, is it sustainable? If someone is committed to sustainability, yes, great. If they if it's not sustainable, they're going to say no to it anyway. So
Yeah.
that's fine, but it's without a connection to the product, um, and why you like it as a customer, you're never going to want to buy it regardless of how sustainable it is, because if you're not going to wear it, then it's not sustainable anyway.
No, and you're gonna chuck it, right? So,
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, great insight here. you know. Thank
Yeah.
you for that. Really need to kind of, publish this kind of wisdom,
Yeah.
Harriet, for all the designers out there, So great. Thank you so much for that insight. And let's kind of we started, talking about that connection with the customer. Um, that leads us to the next important kind of like topic, your customer, right? How, building that consumer awareness, and educating your customers about your brand, not just about the sustainability of your brand or whatever, but just about your brand in general, and building that trust. What strategies do you use to inform, educate, and engage your customers about your brand, your brand's ethos, the sustainability and transparency, and all, all that kind of, brand's identity that you have?
So yeah, I think for me the main one really is storytelling. Um, and maybe that's also like a personal thing as well. That's how I receive information the best. I like there to be a story. I like to go on that journey. So I think this just the storytelling of all of those different elements, actually breaking it down as well, which I think is really important. You can't tell everyone everything in one go. Um, so, taking it slowly, talking about the manufacturers, actually having as much as you can the visuals to show that as well, I think is important. A picture says 1,000 words versus 1,000 words, to be honest. So I think those sort of elements are really important. And getting to meet the customers in person as well, I think is good because they get to meet you as well. And I think there's nothing more personal than that. And really understanding who they are, what they value, and being able to offer that back, in what you're sharing with them is important. But I think just being open about things as well, if anyone ever has any questions, I'm always open to it. And I'd rather be able to share the answers and the things that I'm working on or want to develop for the future as well, versus not telling anyone anything. Because how can you ever build trust if you're not sharing information?
Yeah, that's true. And so that personal connection is very important then as well
Ye-
for you and your brand. And how do you go about meeting them personally? Do you create events, parties, what pop-ups? What kind of are the venues there?
Yeah, I think events, pop-ups are really good. I mean, that's really the biggest way that I've got my brand out there to start with.
Right. Okay.
In doing those pop-up events,
Mhm.
workshops, going beyond selling someone a product actually, and showing people how they can repair their clothes or make them last longer, or getting them to think about what they already own as well, because no one is going to buy your whole range of product and throw out their entire wardrobe. So
Yes.
you've got to think about, they already have pieces that they love as
Yes.
well, and how can your pieces interconnect with those?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think events are really important, but also just showing up online yourself and actually having a face behind the brand. It always amazes me when, when you're emailing out to people and you go on somewhere and it doesn't tell you who that person is behind the brand or the business. And it's so nice to be able to know that and just, actually write hi the person's name rather than nothing, or hi, if it's hi Team Saywood, and I think, well, my name's there, like it's it's everywhere. So, you know, to it's a personal thing. And I think that's again, like, find out your customers' names when you're talking to them. And yeah.
Oh, very good advice there. So, now shifting the conversation a little bit about technology. I'm passionate about technology and how we can incorporate technology to make our lives easier. And it has become an increasingly powerful tool in the fashion industry right now. What ways do you think digital solutions or the technology that's out there right now can help you or can help streamline sustainable practices for fashion brands, no matter what their sizes are, even for, micro brands, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many different ways. I mean,
Yes.
ultimately, as a designer, we already use a lot of technology, and I think that's something really important for people to think about.
Mm.
We're using software programs
Yeah.
every day. We're using predictive text or spell checkers. So
Yeah.
I think actually sort of diving into digital technology and utilizing it is a really good way to just get started, especially for small businesses.
Yeah.
Um, I think, things like we've done at Vestis Labs, actually developing a pattern with an avatar, being able to see the garment ahead of having to make multiple different samples or toiles, I think is quite a really amazing process. Um, but also just like the co collaboration of data as well. I mean, I think there'll be so much coming down the line with that. The storing of your data as well, like, we've got the product ID and actually what
Yeah.
every bit of material is, your
Yeah.
supplier,
Hmm.
having all of that very easy to access, not only as a brand, but actually as a customer, because once you have all that data and you make it accessible for the customer, to start with, yes, there might be like overwhelming elements for lots of people, but actually I think people are getting more interested, and they want to start knowing these bits of information. And I think it will make it much easier to track. So something that I'm personally really interested in is the end of life of the clothing. You can extend it, you can repurpose it, you can redesign it, all of these things. But when it actually does reach end of life, how can we make it easy to actually recycle and make sure that the customer that, it might be a customer that's they're the 10th owner of this piece, because if we're putting it back into circulation, keeping it in reuse, all of that sort of thing, um, and maybe they've never heard of the brand before, maybe the label's fallen off or something. But
Mm.
actually, if there's a way to go back to the start and find out what these materials are
Mm.
and give it to a proper textile recycling hub that can actually take all these pieces apart, imagine buttons that are completely intact, and maybe someone doesn't collect buttons. I don't know about you, I've got a button tin. I feel like lots of people have a button tin, and I would
I
probably
do too.
yeah. Those nice buttons, you're like, I'm not throwing them in the bin, I'm taking those off. But maybe, like, who knows, but imagine actually those buttons being able to be sent back to the original button supplier
Yes.
or to the brand to be
Yes.
reused. Yeah, they
Yeah.
might be a bit, torn and worn, but actually, being able to reuse those is
Yeah. Yeah. Why
um
not?
so yeah, I'm interested in that, like, side of it as well. And I think there's so much benefits of the data and the collective use of it.
Mm. Cool. No, I'm just thinking about buttons now because you just I'm thinking about my button tins and thinking about what nice buttons I have in that tin.
What button can I add to something?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Going back. So before, no, thank you so much for everything. There was like a great conversation, very great insights. Before we wrap up, I want to get kind of like, a quick idea from you. The fashion industry is known for its, high pressure environment, very stressful, and you as a business owner, you must have a lot on your plates. How do you prioritize mental health and wellness in your work? And what steps can the industry take to foster a healthier and more supportive environment for designers, creators, and the staff, and yeah, and the people working in their team. So
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important, and I think it really needs to be done because I think there's a lot of really poor elements to that in the fashion industry.
mm,
Um, I think I think one is the way that people are treated. There sort of seems to be this immense drama around like these collections that are made, and they've got to be the best thing ever, and I get that. I get the pressure on designers, I really do. um
yes,
but the reality is, like, if something goes wrong or it's not the ultimate perfect thing when it goes out, you've got another season. Like, the seasons are coming round faster and faster. So actually, maybe everyone just needs to take a step back and actually reduce the pressure on people, firstly, um, from the top down as well, I would
yeah,
say,
yeah,
because if that goes from the top through to management push it down to their teams, it is a really awful working environment to be in.
yes, yes.
And
And we've been in the fashion industry for so long, and we have experienced
yeah,
many of
yeah.
those, right?
And there are nice people in fashion,
Yes, yes, yeah,
and lots of people that put the pressure on are also nice, and they're just suffering the pressure as well.
exactly. Yes,
Um,
yes,
but yeah, it's, we're making clothes that clothes do have so much like benefit to people's lives. They bring joy. We have to get dressed every day. So yes, it is important. It is a big part of lives, industry. Companies have to be profitable to function, but with it is something that there are other industries that are doing immensely powerful things as well. And actually, I think for the fashion industry, mental well-being, it's really important. We've got to get a grip of it. And I think it's also for small businesses, again, like, take a step back. You can't do everything all at once. So what can you do? What should you prioritize? Um, and something that I've personally done this year, which might be helpful to people going into 2025. I Last year I found that I was just doing too many different things, and I was trying to streamline my days, but one day do social media, one day do marketing, one day do creative, but throughout the week, and it just wasn't working because my head was in all of these different places, and you're constantly thinking about the next thing that you have to do. So this year I've decided I'm going to break it down by week. So I'm going to have a whole creative week to myself, and I'm not going to book anything in because that week is really important and I don't get to do that much creative stuff, surprisingly, because so much of the other areas of the business actually take precedent. So I think really trying to time block, but in the right way for you. And it takes time to figure that out. But
yeah.
so far, so good. 2 weeks in, and I'm pretty happy with the way it's going.
Amazing. I might try to do that weekly because, I block that by days as well. And sometimes there is just not enough hours in a day to finish what you want to finish for that
Exactly.
particular topic or whatever it is, right? So, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I'll start with 2 days then instead of a whole week.
Yeah, doing 2-day blocks.
2-day blocks.
But also, you always overestimate what you can get done in the amount of time.
Yes,
We're very ambitious. We think, yeah,
yes.
I can totally do that. And suddenly you
Mm.
realize you never had enough time to do that in the first place.
No, no, yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. So Harriet, that was such a valuable advice. Thank you very much for that. And, from this conversation, it's so clear that you bring so much thoughtfulness and passion to your work. And I'm grateful to be able to hear that from you today. So it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for sharing again your insights and inspiring all of us with your journey and your work and your passion and vision. So before we go, for our listeners, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm Saywood Studio, Saywood.studio, and also on the website, which is saywoodstudio.co.uk. It is me behind the Instagram, so feel free to drop me a message. Always happy to answer questions as well.
Great. Thank you again for that. And don't forget to stay connected with us at Vestis Labs for more inspiring stories on sustainability, fashion, innovation. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, at Vestis Labs, and of course at vestislabs.com. So thank you again, and until next time.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Bye.
Bye.